Warzone 2 has been absolutely fantastic since its release. However, I know many of you have been complaining about the graphics on there, whether that's to do with stuttering or a lowering of frames per second, or just quality. And although I did do a graphics settings video just as Warzone 2 came out, I'm going to do a slightly updated version of that today, just to show you some settings that you can tweak to get your frames per second increased and to stop any glitching or bugging or stuttering on your game as well. So we start with on-demand texture streaming, and obviously switching this on gives us the best visual quality that we can have on the screen. However, it is also a cause for lowering of frames per second and your connection, and can cause some visual bugs as well. So if you are struggling, absolutely switch this off. Then for the post-processing effects, most of these we want to switch off or minimize as much as we can, and that's great for frames per second and actually our in-game performance anyway. These are my recommended settings here. So turning off world motion blur, weapon motion blur, film grain, and depth of field just requires our systems to do less processing, allowing it to allocate processing requirements to elsewhere, such as frames per second and stability. Just before we move on though, I'd like to tell you about LagoFast. LagoFast offers a way to get a better connection when playing multiplayer by lowering your ping, reducing lag, and boosting frames per second. And the best thing is, it's available on PC and console. Console users simply have to open LagoFast on their PC, search the game they want to play, select your usual server, then choose the node with the lowest ping. You'll get a pop-up taking you through the simple steps for setting it up on your console. This just involves going into your advanced settings on your network and manually entering in network details supplied by LagoFast. With a network server that covers over 60 countries, super smooth gaming is guaranteed. Then when it comes to boosting your frames per second, you can do this with their one-click boost feature. Alternatively, you can use customizable options, which allow you to unlock a truly immersive gaming experience based on your specific requirements. If less lag and higher frames per second sounds good to you, you can download LagoFast by simply Googling it, then going to their website to download it. And they even have a free one-day trial to test it out too. There's also a link to the website down in the description as well. If you decide that you do like LagoFast, you can actually get 30% off with the coupon code SPRING30. Now let's get back to the video. For Fidelity FX CAS, or Contrast Adaptive Sharpening, there seems to be quite a bit of confusion with this amongst the community. So this feature is a setting that enhances the overall image quality of the game just by sharpening the pixels individually without having a negative effect on your PC or console performance. So it's there to fix an issue that sometimes occurs with modern games and you get kind of a blurry effect, and that's by fixing the temporal anti-aliasing techniques. And that blur effect that can occur has been happening on Warzone 2 for a lot of people. So by enabling the Fidelity FX CAS setting, areas with less detail become sharper, and it brings more fidelity to the images in general, giving them more of a real-life feeling. So you can see the contrasts between objects and individuals in the foreground and background. So obviously this will make your game look better, but also it'll actually give you some in-game advantages as well. So by turning this on, it doesn't mean that you're going to get lower frames per second. I should make that absolutely clear. You're still going to have a stable game and decent frames per second as much as your system and the game will allow. This setting actually won't affect it, and I've got my strength all the way on 100, so I am playing on 120 frames per second on an Xbox Series X. And generally when I do that, for some reason I do get a little blurring effect on the screen, so I have to put this strength up all the way to 100. So if you're on next gen on 120 frames per second, please do that. For other people, between 60 and 80 is actually probably best on the older gen. Then as we go down, obviously 120 Hz refresh rate, we want that on if your system allows it. Field of view, I've got mine all the way up on 120, which is fantastic just to see more around us. And obviously on console, we actually have that now along with PC players. But as Call of Duty have mentioned in the past, field of view slider can actually act as a frames per second slider as well, which is why they didn't implement it on Warzone 1. So as our field of view goes up, generally you can expect a lower frames per second if your system can't handle it. So that might be happening particularly on older generation consoles. So if you're having instability or poor frame rate, try turning this down a little bit. Then for our ADS field of view, I've got it on affected. So this essentially keeps our field of view setting on even when we're aiming in. So we do have the advantage of still seeing more around us. But as some people commented in my previous graphics video, if we did put this on independent and we went back to essentially an 80 FOV whilst aiming down sights, when we're aiming at people at longer distances, they'll appear much bigger and it'll be easier to take them on in gunfights. So it's kind of up to you really. Affected works just fine for me and actually lowers visual recoil, so I quite like it. But if you're struggling to hit shots at a long distance or can't quite see people, put it on independent. And then for weapon field of view, I've got mine on wide, so the weapon looks smaller. Again, just allowing us to see more of the map around us and potentially clues for enemies. Third person field of view, I've also got that on max. Then these camera movement settings impact our FPS and stability as well. Fortunately, the best setting in game actually helps with our FPS anyway, so we want to put this on as low as it can go, which is on least 50. And then for brightness, I've just got mine on 55. Our Mazra is very well lit. But if you are on a next-gen console and you've enabled the HDR setting, you're actually not going to be able to edit your brightness in the game because you're relying on those HDR settings. But speaking of HDR, if you are struggling with stability and performance, try switching this off. I know generally the game will look better, but there's a chance it'll just play worse. Now, sadly on console, they're all the settings we get to play with in terms of graphics, so there's not really much more we can do on our end. Hopefully this video did help you out though, and you do have a smoother Warzone 2 experience. If you want to optimize some other settings on Warzone 2, check out this video, or you could even head over here to see how you can rank up your weapons as fast as possible on there as well.